Okay, folks, thank you so much for joining us. If you're on the East Coast like me tonight or late afternoon, but no matter where you are, thank you for taking some time to be with us here tonight. My name is Rachel. I'm with the Progressive Change Campaign Committee. We're so excited to have Dr. Arati Kreibich with us here tonight. Before I kick it off to Adam Green, our co-founder, I just wanted to share a few programmatic notes before we dig in. We really want this call to be interactive, and so to that end, we'd love it if you would all turn on your videos so we can see each other and engage a little bit more. When you're ready to ask your question, Artie's eager to hear all of them and to answer. Please just go to the very bottom in the middle and you will see a chat icon. Just chat me your question, Rachel PCC host, and I will get your question. I will go ahead and ask you to unmute yourself, join us via video if you're not already, and you can ask Artie your question yourself. Before we dig into that, we are going to have two local supporters that are here with us tonight, Sean Brennan and Lisa Schwartz, and they're going to share a little bit why they're so fired up about Arati and her campaign as well. So with that, one final note, while these events don't cost anything, we do hope that if you feel inspired by what you hear tonight, that you'll consider making a contribution to help Arati's campaign. Every dollar counts, every dollar will be maximized, and we would really appreciate if you would make that, consider doing that. So with that, let me go ahead and turn over to our co-founder, Adam Green. Adam?
All right. Thanks, Rachel, and thank you, Artie, for joining us and some PCCC members tonight. So excited about this race, and I really want to let folks know why I'm so excited. Some folks who I would add, I think we have some people who have been on all of our Meet the Candidate events so far, so thanks to you all, and thanks for all the newcomers who are joining us for this first one. You know, this is a really important district to be aware of. You know, every once in a while, there's someone in the Democratic caucus who is not just blah, they are actively destructive for the entire rest of the Democratic Party. And I think Josh Gottheimer in the House is right at the top of the list, actively undermining House Democrats' efforts to use their new majority to our advantage. Honestly, the closest example I could think of in recent history is Joe Lieberman, right? Someone who, for the last 2 years of the Bush administration and the first couple of years of the Obama administration, actively gave the veneer of bipartisanship to right-wing ideas in a way that changed the entire national dialogue and created bad pressure on Democrats to not do what we wanted to do. There were times in the Senate, just again, to draw a point of comparison, where many of the moderate Democrats would have gone along with Senate Democratic leadership, except for Joe Lieberman proactively reaching out to John McCain and others, and then kind of either bullying or cajoling other moderate Democrats to follow, become a bloc, and then block Democrats from actually passing a Democratic agenda or standing up to George W. Bush. Fast forward to where we are now. You know, there have been several heights of outrage and passion during the Trump administration, which is full of outrage and passion, right? The Muslim ban was probably one of the earliest ones. You know, the tragedy that's happening right now, where just complete corruption and incompetence are leading to tens of thousands of extra people dying, probably per month because of Trump, is where we are now. But if you rewind a year ago, so much of the conversation was about children being taken away from their parents at the border, put in cages, put in detention facilities, one of which I visited along the border, where these kids are marched in a line, no parents around, looking over a fence, and on a good day, there'll be people that are there waving at them or holding a sign saying, "We support you." You know, them yelling to people over the fence, being like, "Please help me." And Democrats wanted to do something about it. And once we won the 2018 election, we could do something about it. And Nancy Pelosi was on the verge of doing something about it because Donald Trump needed funding for defense in general. And she was on the verge of using our substantial House majority to put strings attached to defense spending to stop this, you know, just unrestricted taking of kids away from their parents. And Josh Gottheimer was the one who proactively organized moderate and conservative Democrats to say, no, Nancy Pelosi, you can't do that. And she had to pull the plug on those strings. These are not people who self-organized. He didn't just inform her that the votes weren't there. He actively undermined Democratic attempts to do the most human and moral thing. I don't know that that's the top public piece of messaging in this campaign. I'm going to leave it to Arati to talk about the distinctions that are being talked about with voters. But I want you to all understand, as in this world where so many things are, begging your focus, why we're asking you to think of this as a really important Democrat versus Democrat primary to be paying attention to. If you were part of the effort to retake the House last year, if you had high hopes for what House Democrats could do with power, know that Josh Gottheimer is the underminer-in-chief of Nancy Pelosi and a Democratic majority being able to do what they need to do. So, hope that was cheery enough for you, but we're really passionate about this race and so thankful that not just somebody stepped up to take him on, but somebody shocked the political establishment in the district. Somebody who is an existing office holder who won a competitive seat on the Glen Rock City Council a couple years ago in 2017. Someone who many of the local establishment leaders have supported in the past. And now they actually have a credible progressive running again against a credible right-wing conservative Democrat. So we are thrilled to have been an early endorser of Arati and can't wait to hear from her on this call. So I know we have some local folks, but I definitely am eager to hear her and excited to hear your questions for her. Thanks, everybody.
Great. Thank you so much, Adam. You definitely were one of the early endorsers, and you believed in our campaign from back in the beginning, and that was enormously helpful. And it's one of the reasons why we are where we are now in May with 2 months and 1 day to go for our primary election. We're in such a strong position with such an excellent chance of winning this primary and taking our district back. And making it actually blue and true blue. So I really appreciate that. Those of you who are on the call who don't know me, my name is Arati Kreibich. I'm a mom, I'm an immigrant, I'm an elected official, as Adam mentioned, and I'm a trained neuroscientist. Here in North Jersey, actually just before I got on this call, I was on a different call about a neighbor another neighbor who is in the hospital, who has been in the hospital for multiple weeks, actually at this point with COVID-19. Thankfully, he's recovering. But he's not the only one that I personally know of, that we here in my community and in NJ-5 personally know of, because here in North Jersey, you may or may not know, we're among the worst hit in New Jersey. And we're second only to New York in terms of COVID cases and unfortunately related deaths. My partner, my husband, works in a hospital that has the most COVID positive cases. It was one of the biggest ones hit. They had to hastily put together an entire new ICU unit. So we have seen firsthand in our family, in our community, how this has evolved and worsened over time, and the anxiety, all the anxiety that comes over it, that comes with it and worsens over time. So as we're getting through this COVID-19 pandemic crisis together, I have been frustrated, appalled, heartbroken over the lack of preparation that we've had, the lack of protective equipment, particularly for members of my family, my friends, my community, who are frontline healthcare workers and essential workers. And now the lack of focus on helping people and working and those who need it most, right? Not just from the White House, which is almost a given, but also from my Congress member, the same person that Adam talk to you about. So my opponent has refused to hold Trump accountable for the role he's played in worsening this crisis. In fact, has publicly said that this was just Mother Nature, which just wasn't. This was completely preventable, or preventable to a large extent. There's a lot we could have done to save so many more lives than we have done. And so instead of advocating for direct relief for struggling families, my Congress member is supporting bailing out private equity firms and lining the pockets of investors and donors with reports of who bankrolled his campaign, which is just evidence of that in all over the place, especially today if you tune in. So that's just one of the many reasons it's clear that we need a representative who actually, we deserve a representative who actually represents our district. We need more progressive scientists in Congress, particularly one from NJ-5. We need people who are going to advocate for and implement policies that are science-led, that are data-driven, who can see crises like this coming, like the one we're experiencing, coming a mile away. We need folks like me who are always advocated for and will continue to advocate for policies like paid sick leave and Medicare for all. We're seeing why that's so important now. And we need folks who are going to not only understand what we need to do to help the most amount of people as we get out of this pandemic crisis, but like it or not, with climate change, public health crises are coming down the pike. We're gonna have more of them. So what we need to do is have a stronger social safety net. We need to have folks in Congress who understand this, who are far thinking enough to know that this exists and implement and advocate policies that are going to make us more resilient and more sustainable in the future. And the clear way to get there is with Medicare for all. It's with Green New Deal. It's with advocating for policies that progressives have advocated for because they are popular policies. And what I see when I'm talking to voters now is that more and more people, especially those who are unfortunately losing their jobs, unfortunately having their hours cut, and unfortunately losing their health insurance, are really understanding the value of the kinds of things that we're fighting for, even more so, and are getting much more passionate about these issues moving forward. So, and I know that the only way we're going to make this happen is not with the current opponent, my current Congress member that we have in Congress right now. It's the only way we're going to have that happen is that we fight for it with our real democratic values, right? So for me, it was a amazing election that showed me how fragile our democracy is. That have a crisis that we're actually facing, and it's deepened like never before. I would never have imagined quite this depth of reckless disregard for life that we have. And then so many of us stepped up to do more. Like many of us here, I marched, I organized, I rolled up my sleeves, I ran for office, and I won, and I got things done. And it wasn't easy, it wasn't simple. But what it taught me is that when you have the right elected leaders who are fighting for our real democratic values, you can make a significant positive impact. But the thing is, you need the right leaders who are fighting for our real progressive values and real change for everyday people. And that's why I'm here, right? That's why I'm actually doing this primary fight. Because this election is still, for us in NJ-5, for us across the board, is about who we are as progressive Democrats up and down the ballot, who we want to be. And for us in New Jersey 5, it's about how we keep our district blue. And it's about whether or not we give in to the politics of fear or whether we rise up in hope and courage, right? So my current Congress member thinks that the way we're going to keep the seat is we're going to appease the Republicans, that if we undermine the Democratic agenda enough, that if we sound like Republicans, that vote with Republicans, that you're going to keep the seat as a Democrat. Couldn't disagree more. The way we win, the way we've always won, is to show people a better way. It's to stay true to our values, particularly now, in the middle of this pandemic crisis, to lead by example and to govern as a real Democrat. At the end of the day, our district is blue. We have almost 8,000 more Democrats registered than Republicans. And the only way we're going to keep it as blue is by electing real Democrats who are going to fight for the working people. Because these are the values that unite people regardless of their party affiliation. This is what we see. So unlike my opponent, I think that a real Democrat does not absolve our president of reckless negligence in the middle of this pandemic crisis. We have real Democrats. What we need to do is double down and fight harder for our frontline healthcare workers, like my friends, my family, who are struggling to take care of sick people. When we're real Democrats, we fight for leaders on issues like paid sick leave. We fight for seniors who are struggling to afford healthcare even now. We fight for working people who are relying on their savings to retire and not Wall Street lobbyists trying to undermine Dodd-Frank. We fight for refugees seeking asylum and fleeing violence and not those who want to families and caged children. And at the end of the day, we need to fight for generations that are threatened by climate change. We in New Jersey are one of the most vulnerable states to climate change. We're the third fastest warming state. We need to fight for our future, our planet's future, our children's future, not fossil fuel companies who are profiting off of this global crisis. And so at the end of the day, I think what we need to do is fight for principles, because when we stand by our principles, we are fighting for all of us, regardless of whether you're a Dem, a Republican, or unaffiliated. And this is what cuts across. This is what resonates with voters in my district. This is what resonates with supporters in my district. And upholding these real democratic values is how we're going to win. And the only person who's going to help do that is me in this district. Look, this pandemic has only heightened that we need to fix our broken healthcare system. It's redoubled for us all the urgent need to address the climate crisis. And absolutely, I believe we can build a more resilient and more sustainable future. I believe we can help the people, but only if we're going to strengthen our social safety net, only if we enact progressive taxation, only if we implement policies that focus on the people on the planet, which is exactly what my campaign has been about from day one. So I'm a real Democrat. I'm working for real change. I'm not the status quo. I'm exactly what everybody needs, because I'm not politics as usual. And I'm how we're going to keep our district blue and how we're going to actually progress. So my name is Arati, as I mentioned. I want to earn your support, and I'm happy to answer your questions because I can't do this without you. So thank you. Thank you for giving me a platform to share this with you.
Thank you. Great. So we have great questions rolling in. Thank you, folks. Before we get to that, we're going to take about 60 to 90 seconds. We have two folks that will tell you why they are fired up about Arati and her campaign. Sean Brennan is here with us. Sean, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, sir. And if you could briefly share with us why you are so fired up about Arati, please.
Awesome, thank you. Awesome, thank you. Anytime I can talk about Arati, like I say yes, and I talk about Arati as much as I can. First, she's just like a wonderful person. Like she's fun, she's engaging, supportive, encouraging. She knows I just adore being around her and her family. But she's also a natural leader, and you can hear that right from what she just said. She's direct, she's courageous, she's determined, she's respectful. She knows how to organize people. She's so thoughtful and compassionate. You can hear it how she's talking about everything that's going around us. She's innovative, but she's practical. I talk to Arati about a lot of stuff, and we talk about here's where we want to be. She talks about how we get there. She participates. She's hands-on and she leads by example. She's out and about town. We have cleanups around town, and Arati's out there. She started a grassroots campaign here in Glen Rock. Like she said, she marches and she organizes. And it's actually where I first met Arati. She was elected to Glen Rock Council in 2017, and that's where I worked really with her for about a year, where we went through this. And Arati really realized, in order to be a great representative, you have to meet the people you're representing. So she was out there every day knocking on doors, like every day, like out there knocking. She was relentless, and really that passion really inspired and spread to everyone on the team. For me, finally in Arati, we have a representative that we don't have to explain why climate change is so important, why we need Medicare for all, why we need to enact common gun control, and why we need to have compassionate immigration policies that keep families together. For me, Arati is just a beacon of hope and reason, but of leadership and integrity that we really need right now. So I'm hoping that, I'm doing all I can for Arati, and I'm hoping you can too.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, folks, Lisa Schwartz, please forgive me. We have some great questions coming in. I'm going to loop back to you. Please bear with me so we can get some of these questions going. Okay, I have a question from Kathy Washenko. Kathy, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you and ask that you ask Arati your question, please.
Yeah, I was wondering if there was any, sorry, my video's off, any polling or fundraising information on the race that you can share to let us know sort of how viable the challenge that you're undertaking is.
Yeah, so thank you for that question. In terms of polling between my opponent and me, we were actually planning on putting our poll out, and then we had COVID-19 happen. So there will be more data on our race coming up in a few weeks. We're putting that out into the field. We'll know more. In terms of fundraising, look, this is a grassroots campaign. We pulled in actually our strongest quarter in the first quarter of this year, even actually with COVID-19. So we have, I think we raised more than 100 grand this past quarter. It is a grassroots campaign. We're not taking corporate PAC money, refuse to take fossil fuel money. We're really relying on individual supporters as much as possible. So part of that is, of course, doing the phone calls, doing, all of these various things that we're trying to do. We've raised over 300 grand so far. We are on track to raise at least $500,000, which is the goal. And we're on track with that, even steadily, even in the middle of the pandemic crisis. The reality is I'm never going to outraise my opponent, whose the nickname he embraces is the human fundraising machine. And that's because he is the second most recipient of money from Wall Street real estate sector. Draw a clear line to the kinds of things that he's trying to do, even now with the COVID-19 pandemic relief stimulus packages, and who he's fighting for, which are private equity firms, and making sure that we have corporate bailouts in that sense. Right? We don't need to outraise him. We need to do enough that we're not completely outspent 10 to 1. We need to do enough that we can go out there and make sure that we are reaching out to everybody, that we're reaching out to as many voters and as many people as possible. And in the past 6 weeks, actually 4 weeks, we have to all digital or virtual as we have to, and we've actually reached out and done 40,000 phone calls checking in on folks in our district. So we are very strong with that, and the coalition that we're putting together, aggressive groups like PCCC, as well as more groups that are of suburban voters. We have an excellent chance of winning July 7th.
Thank you. Perfect. We have our next question on immigration from our friend Phil Villers. Phil, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, sir, and please go ahead and ask Arati your question, Phil.
Hi.
Hi, Phil.
Many of us are concerned about the disgraceful way and inhuman way we are treating immigrants, asylum seekers. I'm sure that you share that concern. What I'd like to know is, if you're elected, what will you personally attempt to do as a member of Congress?
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Actually, when Adam mentioned Josh's role, my opponent's role in making sure that we didn't have accountability and guardrails into that appropriations bill for CBP, that was the straw that broke the camel's back for me. That was the major reason I decided I couldn't sit quiet anymore, and I really needed to be in this race, challenge him because of that. Because at the end of the day, it's a humanitarian crisis. And while we have folks in the district who feel multiple different ways about immigration, that at the core is something that we all feel very strongly about. And I felt like I was complicit in that decision making that he had done. So for me, that is a core issue, and I appreciate you asking that question. Look, at the end of the day, yes, we need comprehensive immigration reform. Yes, we need to lift the cap on number of asylum seekers. I think it's our responsibility, though, first and foremost, to meet the human needs of asylum seekers. I think the kinds of things that we're doing right now in terms of separating families, in terms of the kids in the cages, in terms of the pandemic crisis as it affects them, is not enough. There's no way that we should be doing the kinds of things that we're doing now. So we, at the very least, we need to start revamping that system. We need to make sure that we have humanitarian aid. We need to make sure that we're investigating human rights abuses that are committed by immigration officers. We need to start addressing that humanitarian crisis yesterday. And moving forward, we need to effort to push for a path for the 11 million undocumented immigrants that we have living in the East. We need to also, we're thinking far thinking enough, plan for the influx of climate refugees that we're going to see coming in the coming years. As the effects of climate change worsen and more of our planet becomes unable to sustain communities, we're going to have this happen. So it's about immediately ameliorating the humanitarian crisis we have, and it's about far thinking about what we're going to do with asylum seekers and how we can welcome them into the country.
Thank you. That's exactly what I wanted to hear, and I look forward to supporting you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Phil. Okay, let's keep on the great questions rolling. We have a question from Monty Allen. Monty, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, and please go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, Arati. Joe Biden is in the process of trying to figure out who he should select as his running mate. And the thing I wanted to ask you is, what candidate, what running mate could he select that would be best received in your district and most helpful to your candidacy?
Okay. I would want somebody who is progressive, who is going to be fighting, who's going to be a true partner in fighting for the kinds of policies that we're fighting for. I would ideally want it to be somebody who's a woman. My preferred candidate didn't quite make it, but we're doing our best with whoever is the Democratic nominee, because the priority is to get Trump out of office. And for me, you know, I think that whoever we have needs to be a partner, needs to be an advocate.
Perfect. Okay, up next we have a climate question from Justin Paglino. Justin, I'm going to go ahead and mute you, and please ask your question, Justin. Justin? Okay, Justin, your video froze, so I'm going to go ahead and ask your Archie, your question for you. Archie, Justin would like to know, what is your position on fracking and a carbon tax?
So in terms of climate change, I am a proponent of Green New Deal. I think fracking, particularly in federal laws, should be outlawed. I think that in terms of a carbon tax, it does not go far enough. It's something that we should have definitely tried in the 80s and 90s. And while, you know, open to it in some way, shape, or form as part of a larger solution, I think that we need to go much farther than that. I think the situation is dire.
Okay. Folks, bear with me. You all have a bunch of great questions. Forgive me if I'm not getting to all of them. I am trying my best. Up next, we have Miriam Thompson. Miriam, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Miriam, go ahead. What's your question?
Well, I want to say I recognize the challenge you raised of Nancy Pelosi, but often frustrated at the lackluster response to children in cages, for example, separated from their families, their lack of response to the escalating military expenditures that are really driving us to war and supporting war profiteers. So I just wondered how you will address those issues: A, more robust leadership; B, foreign policy and military spending, which if rediverted, we could pay for Medicare for all many times over. So I just wondered if you might comment. I mean, I'm not asking you to join the squad, but it'd be wonderful for you to be supportive.
Thank you, Miriam. I'm going to actually share my philosophy, which is that I frankly think the U.S. should emphasize peace and human rights in foreign policy moving forward. I think that's the only way forward in terms of getting leadership. The fact that the defense budget represents something like 54% of all discretionary spending is outrageous. It shows that we are still committed to imperialism, which is not where we need to be. What we need to do is to come together in the international community and lead the way on climate change. This is what we should be thinking about doing. And as a sister of a veteran, I deeply, deeply understand the unique challenges that we face, but which is actually the reason why I hold the lives of our military personnel so highly. And I think that if that's what we're doing, then we're making sure that we are doing everything possible to promote peace and human rights, and stop our forever wars and endless wars, and turn the focus on building peace and fighting climate change. I'm fortunate enough and honored to have been endorsed by Common Defense, which is a veteran-led grassroots movement that has the same views, and that's what I'll be fighting for.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Up next, we have Richard Goodman. Richard, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Richard, what is your question?
Thanks very much, and it's great to have progressive people across the country talking about things. It's a challenging time. I mean, in Nebraska, where I am, we have not too bad Republican congressman, but he's silent on many issues where somebody should be speaking out. So how do we overcome some of the problems? How do you get out and communicate with your constituents? And, you know, I mean, there are real issues about how do you spend the money we will raise. But a final question that I just added is, we have to be realistic at some level, and we've added a couple of $1 trillion of debt with the COVID-19. So how will you be able to sometimes compromise or not? I mean, what are your responses to those kinds of tough economic questions?
Mm-hmm. Those are all really good questions. Absolutely, right? I could not get as much done as I did on council if I hadn't learned how to go across the aisle and talk to folks, right? So one of the successes that I've had in the past couple of years is that Glen Rock is the first municipality, I'm pretty sure in New Jersey, but definitely first in Bergen County, where we were able to implement 100% clean energy program for every single resident in my town at default. And we did that with this RGO program that was a partnership, that was a public-private partnership at the end of the day. This is really important in terms of the scale for climate change mitigation, right? Could not do this if I hadn't learned to speak with folks across the aisle, with Republicans, with independents, with our entire town, to build a consensus, to explain why this was really important, to make sure it was a win-win situation so that we're saving money, we're also trying our best to have a substantial impact on climate change. And in fact, some of the worst or some of the most persuasion I had to do was with Democrats. So at the end of the day, I completely understand we need to do that. But there are values that we stand for that we do not deviate from. And those values center around people. Those are values like we make sure that we take care of kids in cages, that we don't put kids in cages, that we stand up for the humanitarian crisis that's happening there. We make sure that healthcare is a human right, because even with the COVID, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic crisis that we have right now, the long-term health and economic repercussions are going to reverberate for years to come. As somebody who is married to a healthcare professional, we talk a lot about the fact that, yes, we're talking about folks who are dying. What we're not talking about are the long-term health consequences for those who have recovered, who have permanent kidney damage, who have permanent lung ailments. That is going to take a very long time, and it's going to require a lot of healthcare for a very long time. And all of those things require for us as a government to help, and require things like Medicare for all. When we're talking about the economy and jumpstarting the economy, the Green New Deal is the perfect framework in which to do that. This is exactly what we need to not just jumpstart our economy with good green jobs, but also to be able to have a more sustainable future, which is frankly necessary for our species. So yes, completely understandable. We do need to work across the aisle. That does not mean that we appease Republicans and that we don't stand up for what our values are. I think we can definitely have both.
Up next, we have a question from our another friend, Mr. Scott Wallace. Scott, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, sir. Scott, what's your question?
Hi, Arati. Great to see you. I really appreciate your progressive values. Your district is fascinating. The history of the district and the way it's gone it's really challenging, but a great opportunity. I actually ran against one of Gottheimer's best friends in Congress last time, Brian Fitzpatrick. who is co-chair of the Problem Solvers Caucus. And so I know the difficulty of running against one of these problem solver, bipartisan, moderate, independent types. It's very slippery to deal with. But he's got this added advantage of having all the endorsement from the mainstream Democrats. He's got the Clintons, which helps him obviously with his fundraising. He's got Cory Booker. So I wonder about your strategy for peeling off some of that, for neutralizing some of that. And then I know that it's historically a very Republican district. Gottheimer's switched it for the first time in a while by virtue of his strength in Bergen County. I gather you're from Bergen County. So what's your strategy for, I mean, you got to carry a huge majorities in Bergen County to do. And finally, is AOC going to come in and help you out?
The third one, I don't know, but that would be great. If you know her, put in a good word. We're right across the bridge. So the second one, I'll take that one first. I love that question. Thank you for asking that question. I just wanted to say I didn't ask you to ask that question. We don't know each other. Look, absolutely. You know, one of the things that people talk about is the fact that, oh my gosh, we had this Tea Party conservative in here for so long, and we did, and we got rid of him in 2016. Josh was the glimmer of hope we had in there. The district is so different now than it was in 2016. You know, I think the fact that Trump was elected has made a seismic shift that's palpable, right? So since 2014, we've been trending blue. We are now that solidly blue. Every year, we see more and more Democrats being registered in our district than Republicans, and a lot of them are new. And the data that shows there, they tend to be more progressive, right? We have, in 2016, Josh won with 2 points. In 2018, he won with 14. That was a huge change, right? The reason he did that was not because of his sort of lackluster performance necessarily. It's because we activated grassroots groups. I formed one. We have 22 loose grassroots groups. As a coalition, I volunteered for him in 2018. I had a big Get Out the Vote rally in my backyard where we had 40 to 60 people who show up. Clearly, that's not happening for the primary. As a grassroots group, as a coalition with Indivisible, we knocked on something like 30,000 doors, right, for him. That grassroots energy is not there for him. It's there for me because I am part of the grassroots movement. You know, I am part of the newly activated coalition that we have. And that's exactly why we have such a great chance, July 7th. And that's exactly why we're going to win. And look, when we're talking across the way, when we're talking to unaffiliated folks, when we're talking to folks who are worried about the general election, the thing is, the reason folks are unaffiliated in New Jersey is because New Jersey politics, the perception is it sucks, right? The perception is it's very corrupt. So folks don't want to be part of either establishment. And when you have somebody like me who is here, who is standing up, who is clearly not politics as usual, who has clearly gone in here with the agenda of the people, that's across all party lines. And anti-corruption and talking about not taking corporate money, that cuts across all party lines too. And that's actually exactly what's going to unite people. And that's why we're going to win both July 7th and November.
So no strategy for dealing with the Clintons?
Oh, sorry. I forgot that part of the question. I got all excited by your second part. In terms of dealing with the Clintons, look, primary challenger to a Democratic incumbent, it's going to be, it was always going to be an uphill battle. What we are doing, though, is we are forming this coalition of progressive groups, but also suburban voters, right? So with our endorsements with our coalition, so we have PCCC, which I'm very grateful for. We have Indivisible. We're a handful, really, of campaigns that has Indivisible, both national and local. We have Working Families Party, which is huge, veteran-led organization, but also Vote for Choice, Vote Mama, a lot of the folks that are appealing to suburban voters as well. And it's this combination of progressive and groups that are appealing more to suburban voters, including Moms Man Action, for example, is really what's going to help us get over that hump. This is how Marie Newman won in Chicago, and I think it's the same model that we have with a very similar district. We talk to our voters about the fact that my opponent is not a moderate. He is ranked as one of the most conservative House Democrats. We are not ranked as one of the most conservative House districts. Really, we're not. And the data shows that we're not. So yeah.
Perfect. Okay, great. We have a question from Stacy, Stacy Hersing, about messaging and climate. Stacy, I'm going to go ahead and mute you. Ms. Stacy, what is your question?
Yes, hi. I was wondering, this is a broader question about the use of the term Green New Deal. I obviously know how it started, but I just don't think it's a winning phrase. I think it needs to be rebranded. The people, it's inside baseball term. Progressives know what it means. Everybody else doesn't, and a lot of people who are not progressives also intrinsically don't like those words. They don't like New Deal. They don't like the word green. But we're going to need a much bigger coalition to get climate change is my top priority. And I also agree with you that we've got to go a lot faster than even the, let's say, the mainstream numbers currently show. So my priority is is making it possible to get the most people on board with things that make sense. So I like a lot of the things that are in the Green New Deal. I don't think that the name itself is strategic. I actually think it holds us back from getting more of the policies and the goals of the Green New Deal implemented by using that term. So that is my, I guess, question / pitch, because I would love to see bold, important action happen on climate change. I think it's desperately needed.
No, I appreciate that. I will say that in general, we talk about climate change, we talk about green jobs and economy. We have talked about Green New Deal. In general, we haven't gotten, especially with Democrats, we haven't really gotten a lot of pushback on that, not in the district, but really we also try and augment that with, what it actually means. And so that's a good point for us to consider. Thank you. And if you have any alternatives, please share them.
Okay, folks, thank you so much. Please.
Can I answer?
Oh, yeah, please go ahead.
I would just say, if nothing else, start with jobs of the future. Start with use what's in the bill as talking points for how to actually make important fundamental change on climate change, and just, if nothing else, stop highlighting the term Green New Deal and just talk about the bullet points of what it's going to achieve and how that's important for everyone, across the board. That would be my suggestion.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. That's definitely something that I try to do when I talk, especially out in Sussex and Warren. And I will say that those are the more rural counties that are not to be. My opponent doesn't even use the phrase climate change when he's talking to our constituents. And so I've used both the phrase climate change and things surrounding Green New Deal. And, I've survived. And not only that, at the end of the day, we already know that our farmers understand that climate change is here, and that they're actually on board in terms of mitigation. And they just want to make sure that they're represented. And I think that's important. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Folks, bear with me. If I didn't get to your question, please forgive me. I'm going to stick my email in the chat box, and I promise that if we didn't answer it, I will connect you to the best person from RT's team, and we will get that answered for you. So I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Let me go ahead and turn it over to Adam to share a few last thoughts with us.
Sure. Well, first, Arati, again, thank you so much for joining us and really kind of fleshing out your worldview during this conversation, which I think were hugely helped along by the great questions that we got from folks on everything from foreign policy to climate. I heard a couple questions that basically sent a signal to me that you get how amazing Arati is, and there's a question of feasibility of winning this race, right? I think Arati pointed out correctly something that we've seen in many districts, which is when you're taking on an incumbent, of course, the establishment will not be your best friend in that race. And the question is, how credible a candidate do you have? and how credible a campaign can you run. But also the underlying dynamics are key. And I love that you pointed out that this went from a 2-point to a 14-point Democratic district in just the last couple of years. That's a key piece of the electorate in the primary, but also the feasibility of winning the general. I hope it was glaringly apparent from so many people on this call who I know talked to a lot of candidates that Arati has a worldview, right? When these questions came up, it wasn't just like, what is my bullet point on this answer? But at one point she said, I'm going to let you know what my philosophy is on this issue, right? When the carbon tax came up, having someone who has a framework of solutions that were appropriate for the 80s and 90s versus the magnitude of the problem of today is somebody that we can count on when they actually get to Congress to not just be a good vote, but to actually be a leader and a partner with us on the issues that we care about. At the end of the day, some of this has to be a gut question for people deciding where to put your time and your money. And I really think that, Arati, what you said about your decision to run, that if you have an office right now, you have a career right now, you have a family right now, but you felt like you would be complicit in what he was doing to really undermine a Democratic agenda if you didn't step up and run this moment, I think is our motivation for caring about this race, and then you being a great candidate put us over the top and wanting to endorse early. And I would ask the rest of you to trust your gut. I know that we've had nearly 1,000 PCCC members donate to Arati's campaign so far. I do want to say thank you to Marjorie Roswell, who is on this Zoom, who I think chipped in $500 during this Zoom call. Thank you, Marjorie. And we'll have to make decisions about where we put our money, but part of the reason that we wanted to make Arati one of the first candidates that we held out to some of the donors in our world and activists in our world is the stakes in this race are high. This is a high reward scenario if we win this race. The fundamentals are there, and the question is, will we have the capacity to fuel a competent campaign? So I really do hope that if you're inspired by Arati, and if you understand the perniciousness that someone like Josh Gottheimer can do to the victory that we achieved in 2018, that you will figure out a way to donate on the higher side for this very, very important race. So those are my final thoughts. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. And Arati, again, thanks for being such an inspiring, bold, progressive candidate. It's great being in the trenches with you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, folks, thank you so much for being with us tonight. That was a lot of fun. We were thrilled that Arati was here with us tonight, but most importantly, thank you for taking the time to be with us. We appreciate the engagement. If you look down at your chat box, we made it easy. If you want to consider making a contribution, you feel compelled and inspired by what you heard, please consider doing that. Again, my email is also in that. If I didn't get to your question, I'm sorry. Please email me, and I promise I will get you the answer. So please stay healthy, stay safe, stay well, and keep an eye open for the next candidate we're going to feature. Thank you all so much. Good night.